Hello, everybody. Welcome back to 40th Eve. I hope you all are doing well. Hope you all are having a great week so far. A little bit different to what we normally do on a Sunday, Monday, where we take a look at obviously all the news in League Two, all the games that we'd normally do after every week. A little bit special this episode, and one I'm really looking forward to. But before we introduce today's special guest, I am, of course, joined by Jake. How's things, mate?
I'm good, thanks. I'm very looking forward to this one. It's been on the cards for a little while now, and I've been really looking forward to it.
It has, and even more so, I think it's become pretty public knowledge if you're listening, I'm a Grimsby Town supporter. So this one's quite exciting for me. We are, of course, joined by Grimsby Town boss and the former Crewe boss as well, who won promotion with them all a few years ago now. It's David Artell. David, thank you so much for coming on the pod. Thank you. We appreciate your time today. We'll kick things off. I think the fact that you've been at Grimsby now, I think it was at the end of November you first joined, and it's been a little bit of time there. You've obviously had a couple of transfer windows, and quite a bit has happened, at the club since you've been there. How have you enjoyed it? How have you sort of settled into the role?
And I think the first thing to say, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here.
No worries.
I think the first thing to say is it's a club and a town full of really good people. I come from very similar sort of stock, if you like. Where I'm from, it's a very similar town to Grimsby. And the people have been great, and they've welcomed me with both arms, open arms. They've provided a lot of support. The first 6 weeks was ridiculously tough. There was lots of things going on at the football club, some that's public knowledge, some that's not. And obviously the festive period and then straight into a transfer window, and that was an extremely tough time. And I thought the transfer window in January went particularly well. We certainly strengthened in areas we needed to make us better. And then obviously we've had a bit of I'm not really keen on revolution, but we've obviously had a bit of a revolution in the summer to change lots of things, and we're now starting to find our feet, and I think everyone can see that. So it's been good. It's been a challenge, trying to change a few hearts and minds along the way, which is good fun. But it's been great. I have to say, I've loved every minute of it.
Yeah, as you've mentioned, it's probably not been the smoothest of rides. Obviously, we all know it was a difficult last season on numerous parts. I think it's safe to say, but we're obviously in a new season now, very early days in the campaign. A lot of change in the summer. I think it was probably expected. Quite a lot of players moving on, quite a few coming in. How would you sort of assess the start early on? Because there's been a few wins in there, a few decent enough performances, I feel, but probably not got maybe the results we feel. I'm not sure how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think there was only Salford that's had a tougher start on paper. Now, I know football games aren't won or lost on paper, but we feel as though the underlying performance has been good. We could have done more at Fleetwood first game, but we actually controlled the game. We just couldn't find a goal. Then we've had some real good performances. We've obviously beat Bradford twice in the cup, in the league, fully deserved on both occasions. We went to Chesterfield, and although we lost, we were the better team, even against 11 men. And they're the bookies' favourites. So we know that we've had some good results, some good performances. We've had some okay performances, and then last week we had a mixture of the two. We weren't very good first half, and we were good second half and deserved a point at least. So we're inconsistent. We know that we keep shooting ourselves in the foot as well. But that will come with more practice together. If truth be told, it's a new group. And more games. Hopefully that'll come starting on Saturday. But we know that we're asking them to play in a slightly different way than maybe sometimes they've been used to. Certainly one or two of them. Most of them not, because nowadays they get taught to play football as opposed to just whack it. But we're trying to get the best out of them. And I think anyone who come to the Bradford game and went to the Chesterfield game would see what we're trying to do. And I think the fans can see that now. But now it's about reproducing that every game, and obviously winning games. It's a results-based business, but the underlying performance has generally been good, and we've got to maintain that.
Yeah, of course. You mentioned that about the style of football. I think from what we saw when we came in, it initially started pretty well. It looked like the players had been taking it on board, and then you saw that period around January, February time, which probably the results were okay. The performances were okay, sorry, but I mean you had a few of those results in which, to be honest, I'm not going to mention. And it was after the Doncaster game, wasn't it, in which things changed, a change of shape. What sort of lessons did you really learn from that? Because it was a tricky period for the club at the time. You're getting hammered in. I said hammered in terms of results, probably not so much performances, as I said.
Yeah, I think you've got to put everything into perspective. We should have been probably 4-1 up against Walsall and went in 2-1 down at half time. Doncaster had 4 shots and we conceded 5 goals, and we were a better team for parts of that game. So you end up sort of scratching your head a little bit. But the key thing is you find out who's with you, who's not with you. And I can remember I spoke to a guy called Jed Salzano, who was he's part of the Cobra committee. So when there's a big security thing in the government, he's one who sits around the table with the Prime Minister and everything. He was a special forces guy and all that kind of stuff. And he said, in times of crisis, talk more. And I can remember I spoke to a lot of people. After the Doncaster game, we was in on the Sunday. The staff had probably a 3-hour meeting, had a meeting with the owners, the technical director, a consultancy group on the Monday for probably about 2 hours. And there was no shouting at any point. There was no, I don't know, fear of speaking honestly and openly. And this is in both meetings. And in the end, you come out with a real clear way of moving forward. That's not the time to panic. And I appreciate that some clubs do, but that's not the time to panic. And I said all along, we because I said, come out and said we won't go down. People held that against me. It was bonkers. We didn't go down, and we were never going to go down, even though I'm sure people thought because we're 4th, 5th, 6th bottom, whatever it was. People go, no. You just know there's a feeling inside the club. If you're going to go down, if you're all fighting, if you're good enough, and that was the case. Did we need to make changes in the summer? Of course we did. Of course we did, because some of the players, quite frankly, weren't good enough, and quite frankly, some of the players couldn't play the way we wanted to play. And you can see now that has changed, and we've got, rather than making sure we're hard to beat and hoping we score, we now can create lots of chances, and we're just going to tidy up the other end and get that balance right. So, yeah, it's a testing time, but it was no more testing than the previous sort of 6 or 8 weeks for various reasons, and there was testing times towards the end of the season, and quite a lot of that will remain private, and some of it is in the public domain, so it's not easy, but that's the job that I love and I get paid to do, and you sort of accept those challenges however they come.
Yeah, of course. I think it's been, we knew that there was obviously quite a lot going off the pitch as well, in which, as you say, quite a bit of it is public domain, and some of them which will obviously remain to one side. But you mentioned about obviously the changes in the summer, about some players about not really probably grasping to maybe the style you wanted to. How would you? I mean, we're sort of talking about the transfer window. How do you probably assess what we've done? I mean, because there's some names in which, if I'm speaking as a fan perspective, is but some promising names in which I think could have big futures of the game. George McEachran and Cameron McJanet in particular, and Yasin Svan Thorson is probably the more interesting one from Iceland. What did you make of the transfer window? Was it pretty much what you wanted, or?
Well, we didn't get Haaland, which is our first target, but it's
the budget, I feel, but
yeah. No, I think if you look at our squad as a whole, I think if you look at whatever you would pick as our starting 11, which is obviously objective among every fan, I think everyone would say that we've got a stronger squad, a better squad, and we've got a stronger starting 11. Is Jason going to score more goals than Granova? Yeah, I'm sure he is. Is Charles a better player if he's fit? And when he is fit, which he's been for all this season, than Abu? Yes, he is. You know, I know that's only my opinion and people might disagree, but wherever you look, we've strengthened and also developed players within the building. You know, when you have a pre-season with them, you can spend more time out of the public eye working with players and making sure they grasp exactly what you want. I don't think any of the, you know, I got told that people weren't having Kieran Green, for example. People don't think Evan Corey's up to it. Well, they've been outstanding, both of them. And when you sort of get them out of the limelight, and you know, I can remember going to York and we'd had a really tough physical day the day before, so we knew that it was going to be really a tough game for us. And everyone goes, "Oh, it's rubbish," and all this and that. We'd ask them to do specific things, and they did it really well, and we were really pleased with them. But you can't come out and say that because everyone looks at the result in a pre-season friendly, which is bonkers. But there was one or two players that were really good at what they'd done. So you know, there were lots of good things. So developing players and getting better players in the door, I think as a whole, we've certainly improved. That's for sure.
Yeah, and if I'm going to say, I personally agree. I think you mentioned about Greeny and Corey in particular. I think if again, speaking this is more of a fan's perspective, I think they've been two of our better players this season. I think Greeny in particular has quite surprised me at times, actually. But we know that, you know, he's full of energy. You know, you're always going to get, you're always going to get 110% from him, and then some. And Corey is, I say, young in terms of like football, not really played a lot of at his age. But already he does look like he's starting to become a key, I say, sort of a key figure in this team. I've always seen quite a little bit in Corey to suggest that. It's just obviously just playing regularly with him.
I agree with everything you've just said. You know, I think when you give players a chance to learn, to improve, then the ball's in their court, and that's part of my responsibility, to improve players. If I can improve every player 1%, then we're going to be 10% better or 11% better, whoever's on the pitch. And that's a big part of the job, I believe. You know, because you're not going to get every single recruitment or recruited player right. That's just not going to happen. That's the target, obviously. And we've still got work to do on that. You know, we've done a transfer window review. You know, so we know where we're at in terms of what mistakes we made, what mistakes we didn't make, what went well. That doesn't mean to say that it'll go well again in the future, but we know, I think it's really important to review what you've done so you don't fall into the same traps as, you know, in subsequent windows. So we're quite happy with where we're at in terms of what we've done. Now we've got to be more consistent, both in games and from game to game. And if we do that, then we'll win more games than we lose.
Absolutely.
You mentioned recruitment. Do you prefer the sort of old-fashioned eye test of managers, or do you look at numbers and stats a lot more?
I think you've got to have objective and subjective. You know, I don't think you can rely on one or the other. I think one's more reliable than the other. Because it's objective, but you can also become sort of like analysis paralysis. And the key thing is, if you don't know what you want from a data perspective, the data can tell you anything. If you like, you've got to understand what you need data-wise to be able to look at the data, and I think that's really important. You know, were we data-led? Yes, without a shadow of a doubt, we were data-led, and I'm quite comfortable with that, because it takes out ambiguity. But do I want subjective opinion? Yes. To what degree? Well, that's the sort of question, if you like, because do we have the resources to every player that we try and recruit? You know, we've seen them 20 games. Well, no, because we haven't got that resources. Does that mean a 20-minute watch on video? Probably not that either, because that's not enough. So there's somewhere in that where that line sits, and we've got to make sure that we're all comfortable. And I say we, it's not just a decision made by myself. we've all got to agree. That's how I sort of operate, if you like. I will take counsel from all the staff, whether that's Sean and Ben, the assistant head coach and the first team coach, or Steve Crouch and the goalkeeper coach, Greg Howard, the sports scientist, as well as the board. How do you see these players? Do you like these players? They're not offering opinion based on technical competence. It's just whether they like what they see. We'll give them the pros and cons, and we'll be perfectly honest with them. They can do X, Y, and Z. We're not sure they can do A, B, and C, and sit around the table. And when you've got that collective buy-in and collective sort of understanding of what people are good at, then you tend to make better decisions than not, I think, without it being a committee, if you like. Because I think if you have a committee, you end up going down the middle and going safe often. And that's not good. Sometimes you need to be really bold, but at the same time, you don't want to be reckless. So, it's a collaborative approach from us all. It's just that my head's the neck on the block, if you like. So that's how it works. So it's been good. It's been good, I have to say.
Good stuff. I just wanted, just before we sort of just move on a little bit, just more of a bit of a wider look on League Two this year. Obviously, we saw the teams that went up last year. Mansfield, Wrexham, Stockport, and Crawley. I think was probably a surprise. But in terms of what the pre-season for what people said there, obviously, a few teams that have come up and have come down. Fleetwood, Carlisle, Port Vale, and one other, Cheltenham. That was it. To beat them shit. And obviously, coming up from the National League as well, Sheffield and Bromley are who we've got this weekend. How have you certainly seen like League Two maybe compared to last year? Is it? It sounds ridiculous because I'm not sure, but is it maybe a little bit more of a level playing field? Do you think? Because there's still like a little bit of money around, but I'm just not sure what you think.
Yeah, I think it's slightly weaker. I don't think it's too much weaker. I'd say, obviously, Wrexham, Mansfield, and Stockport spent a lot, and so did Forest Green, like hell of a lot. Double what we spend, for example. They should never have been in the position they were for whatever reason they were. So losing 4 very well resourced in terms of playing budget football club is obviously going to make the league slightly weaker. But then you've got to remember that Port Vale are spending a fortune, Carlisle are spending a fortune, Chesterfield have spent a hell of a lot of money. So there's 3 out of the 4 back in. It's just that it's not as publicised. Everyone knows that Stockport are well resourced and well run, I'd say, and really well run. And everyone knew that Wrexham were spending money like Oscars. So that's where it's at. But although playing budget is highly correlated to finishing position, that's not the be all and end all. And Crawley showed that last year. I showed that when I was manager of Crewe when we got promoted with the 3rd lowest budget in the league. So it can be done. You just need a bit of patience, a game philosophy, model, time. Time's the big thing, and collective buy-in. And that's not just from players and staff. That's from board members and supporters and sponsors and everyone associated with the football club. And if you got that, before we come on air, the producer was telling me that, if he's an Oldham fan and they should have probably stuck with Richie Wellens a long time ago because they had stability, and Salford probably should have stuck with Crewe Alexandra because they had the best chance. And it's only in hindsight that you see these. Oh no, sorry, it was you, wasn't it? Yeah, saying, or was it? I can't remember whether it was you or the producer, Aaron. But the time is really important, and if you're given the time, most managers will succeed. I believe that, and I certainly believe I will. So, you've got to get some foundations in place. There's lots of things going on behind the scenes that we're implementing in terms of processes around transfer windows, in terms of play recruitment, so as well as development, of players. So that all takes time to devise, implement, and then get the fruits of your labour. It doesn't just happen overnight. And one of the best examples is Harrogate. Simon's been there for 10 years. They were literally in step 4 of non-league or something, and they've survived and doing really well in League 2. The stability, that's really key, and alignment's really important. So, I think it might be ever so slightly weaker league, but not by much at all. The difference is that your Mansfields, your Wrexhams, your Stockports had alignment and stability, and the clubs that I've mentioned are Port Vale, new manager in the summer, Carlisle spending telephone numbers, just changed the manager today. There's teams that have got less alignment because of managerial changes, really, which helps. It helps clubs like us, because the more instability amongst other clubs, the greater chance we have of being successful, irrespective of what they spend on players.
Absolutely, that's really insightful. Jake, do you want to go for a few?
Yeah, I was just going to sort of go back towards your Crewe days, and obviously we'll get into it a little bit more detail. But what was like your best experience at Crewe? Obviously, being the first person to play it and manage it to get in promotion, was that the real highlight?
Yeah, I think. I suppose. It was a highlight, but a low light, simply because it was obviously during COVID, and I found out we got promoted from my assistant at the time, Kenny Lunt, who phoned me while I was in the garden digging, which is not the way you want to find out you got promoted. You want to do it with a last-minute winner in front of a full stadium and everyone running on the pitch, kind of thing. So I'd certainly take it again, obviously, but it certainly wasn't the emotion-fueled way that it wants to be done. But at the same time, to be the only person to have got promoted as a player and as a manager of a club that's been going, whatever it is, 137 years or something, is something that I'm incredibly proud of. So yeah, that was. It took 2.5-3 years of hard work to get to that point, which people don't realise. Come in very similar to where I took over at Grimsby, and you end up building and building and building, and like I say, getting promoted with the third lowest budget, then finishing the top half of League One with significantly lowest budget, and then selling half the players into the Championship. So that can happen. That can definitely happen, and that's what we're trying to do and trying to replicate at Grimsby.
Yeah, it would be nice. Well, just great. Yeah. We've obviously just mentioned about Crewe there as well. You've obviously were a player there, and obviously I've sort of just grown into you obviously becoming the manager there. Was it always something you wanted to do? Was it something that I think towards maybe your playing days you maybe took like a little bit more of a key interest in how managers maybe do things?
Looking back, yes, but I didn't feel that at the time. Obviously, I was the academy manager at Crewe. I loved the role. We were the 6th most productive academy in the whole country, so we was better than, I think it was like something like 21 Premier League or 21 Category 1 teams or something like that. 14 Premier League teams we were better than, and this is in terms of actually producing footballers, footballer minutes, the whole shebang. And that was a really rewarding job. But at the same time, sort of unbeknownst to me, I was obviously being nurtured to take over. So I'd been invited to fans forums to sit on the end as the academy manager. I'd done the odd press conference in a different way as opposed to a player. You were sort of explaining what the academy was, because the chairman at the time had sort of obviously seen something in me that I hadn't actually seen myself, if you like, or I didn't understand that the opportunity was right in front of my nose. So obviously when I got offered the job, I was delighted to take it. It was extremely hard work and a real eye opener. That was taking over in the January transfer window, and that was bonkers and crazy. but it was really, really good at the same time and a real challenge. There was, at the time, things going off in the background at Crewe, which we all know about, which was extremely tough. I've said like really, really tough when you're the face of the organisation and you're getting a camera and a microphone and asked to explain things that happened when I was only a baby myself. It's hard. But there were the challenges that you put in front of you, and you've got to try and win football matches and make players better. You know, there was two ways to win at Crewe: developing and selling players and winning football matches. Whereas I think every other club in the country is probably just winning matches. So I was grateful in that respect. And even though we only sold sort of like a couple of players in that first couple of years, I knew that I was developing a team full of them. And obviously that allowed the club to rake in a lot of money being in a higher league before they sold them all straight after COVID. So yeah, it was a real nice introduction into football management. You know, I think I was something like the 5th or the 6th longest serving manager in the country by the time I left, and doing 5.25 years, 5.5 years, something like that. Was a real good grounding because you learn about everything, you know, and you do everything. You know, there isn't the resources at a club like Crewe. I didn't have a head of recruitment. You know, there was no director of football, so there was no recruitment department. I was it, as well as head coach, manager, you know, chief negotiation man, everything.
Tea lady, that one.
Oh yeah, I certainly made many a bruise for the room, that's for sure. And it was tough, but it was also a great grounding because you got to find out about everything. And I'm, like I say, I'm immensely proud of my time at Crewe. That last season wasn't great. We got relegated, obviously, but I'm pretty certain Pep Guardiola wouldn't have kept Crewe in the league when you've just sold your 5 best players and you've got the lowest budget. It's just impossible. That's the truth. That's not me trying to look for excuses. We tried everything, changed the formations, younger players, older players, the whole shebang. But you find out what works, what doesn't work. You know, I learned more in probably the last year and the first 6 months than I did in the 4 years in between. And I got the opportunity to go through it. Most managers, certainly nowadays, they have 3 bad performances, they're gone. Whereas I got a chance to see what could work, what didn't work, what worked well. So you become a massively better manager because of that. You learn more through the tough times than you do the good times, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, of course.
What sort of messages from that tough time that you experienced have you sort of used to your advantage when you took over the Grimsby in a sort of similar situation?
Well, I think, as I alluded to a minute ago, when you go through a real tough time, that's not the time to panic, get angry. It calls for real calm heads. You know, I've got 2 brilliant owners. We've got some new investors and some new owners now, but we've got 2 primary owners that are fantastic people who are really successful, who are calm and level-headed, but also fans, you know, and they can get emotional, obviously, as all fans do, but they are terrific people. And I'm sure they've seen adversity in their working lives. But that doesn't always equate to what happens in a football club, because from what I've heard and seen at other football clubs, quite a few owners sometimes lose all the marbles when things go wrong. So when things aren't going right, it's not a case for throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's sort of asking, right, why are we in this situation? What's gone wrong? How can we correct it? And that's what's happened with a couple of things, both in-house, both in terms of the coaching staff and players, coaching staff, players, owners, the whole thing. You know, so they're the key things. It's about, as I said to you before, but you know, when I spoke to Jed and listened to Jed, he was saying in times of crisis, speak more. Don't go and sit in your office. Go and find out exactly what people are thinking. Go and find out what the answers are. And I try and do that more. And that came from him, but also going through 2 or 3 real sort of troughs, if you like, at Crewe in the previous role. and not being afraid to make bold decisions. I think that's the other thing.
It's interesting to hear. One thing I did want to touch on, I mean, you did touch on a previous question, was of course during your time at Crewe, we saw these players coming out of the academy and how well they've done for their careers. Likes of Perry and G, Tom Lowry's done pretty well. Charlie Kirk, Callum Ailey, who we've obviously got at Town, a couple of others as well. How much of a privilege is it for you to be massively involved in the development, especially when you've got Perry and G, who's one of the more, in particular, is one of the more, is one of the better players in the Championship in his position?
Yeah, I think it's always important. What people don't realise is I had like Owen Dale, who's at Oxford in the Championship now. I had him at under 10. So I coached him at under 10, under 13. I'm trying to think. I had Kirky at 16. I had Callum Ailey at 16. I can remember Kirky getting sent off at Huddersfield away for swearing at the linesman and speaking to him, leaving him on the Monday night's training, speaking to him on the Wednesday night training about what he should and shouldn't have done and how he should and shouldn't see officials. So I've had a real big hand in a long time before the first team with a lot of them. I can remember Harry Pickering when he was under 16, still playing under 14s football. He's played whatever 150, 200 games at Blackburn because he was so slight coming through as a number 10. I was telling one of the staff today he was desperate to play number 10. Had played a few games number 10 in under the previous manager, and I put him at left back. And initially he was saying, "Can I play a bit higher?" And I said, "It's not about where you start; it's about where you finish on the pitch, and you can still end up in that number 10 position or inside, outside, and go and score some goals." And 50 games later, he's still saying, "Can I play higher?" And I'm saying, still start at left back and keep getting higher. And when we sold him to Blackburn for nearly £750,000, he gave me a lovely bottle of champagne and said, "You were right all along." So there's some real nice sort of stories and some anecdotes to recall, but that's for a later date. I want to do that again with Grimsby because it's ready to go. Like I said to you before, the fans are terrific, the people are terrific. It's like when I say it's a one-club town, there's nothing within 45 minutes. People think that Grimsby is close to Doncaster. It's nearly an hour down the road. They think Scunthorpe's close. It's half an hour away. Hull's an hour away. Lincoln's an hour away. There's nothing around here. And the one constant thing is the football club. You can change MP. The fishing industry went a long time ago, and now green energy's coming. But the one thing that's been constant through all this upheaval and the decimation of the fishing industry and the birth of the green energy has been the football club. It's the one constant, and that's, it's a huge privilege to being in charge of a football club that's plays such an important part of people's lives, and that's not lost on me, I have to say, because I grew up in, like I said, in a very similar area. And the football club was the one constant there when all the coal mining and the steel industries went. So I've seen it firsthand, and I know that out of this sort of ashes, if you like, of poverty, of a lack, the industry's going, can breed success. You have to look at Rotherham Stadium now and the fact that they've been in the Championship. The fact that Grimsby have been in the Championship more than being in League One and League Two combined that's not a fluke. And we've got to get back there. Will that tie in with the town's success? Well, I hope so, because the town's going places. You can see that around. And I want the football club to be a driving part of that. And that's because it's such an important part of people's lives.
Yeah, I certainly agree. It's a massive part of my life. That's one thing for sure. I think we're just, if I'm going to be honest, I think for the fact that during my lifetime, we've not really seen. I mean, last year was our highest. Well, the season before that was the highest finish in 17, 18 years, I believe it was. I mean, that was the same season we had, obviously, that remarkable FA Cup run. But that's the only really sort of real success that I've had in the Football League. So it'd be nice to see what they say. Just for people maybe even a bit younger than me, I'm only 21. But Yeah, but even then, I certainly get behind the fact that the town is going places. You know, there's certainly quite a lot going on that's probably not been evident in the past. That's for sure. One thing I just wanted to touch on real quick as well, with that Crewe team, the one that got promoted that season. For when I started following town, Crewe won 2-0 on the day, 2 goals in the second half. I still stand by that's one of the best performances from an away side I've seen for a long time. Come to Blundell Park.
Do you want the honest answer?
Go on.
I can't remember it.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. When I first met Sean, he said something about when Crewe beat Grimsby 5-0 under Marcus Bishop.
Yeah.
And I went, I genuinely can't remember it. And then he told me about George Cooper, who we sold later that year to Peterborough. And then I remembered that the game plan was to play him behind the right side centre half and the right wing back. At which point, Sean and Ben Davis went, "Yeah, that was us too," which I didn't realise because I wouldn't have said it. But yeah, listen, there's been lots of. We've got to get to that stage, and we will. We will. We actually shouted out where, like I said, we went to Chesterfield, who were the bookies' favourites, and we were the better team. You know, we were the better team for the first half an hour. We were the better team in the whole of the second half, whether they had 11 or 10 men. But we shot ourselves in the foot with a crazy 15 minutes, and we've got to get rid of that. But we know that we've got them performances in us this season, and if we do that and cut out the silly mistakes, we'll have good performances and good results off the back of it as well. And that's where we're heading.
Absolutely, yeah. Jake, is there anything you want to add?
Just obviously, when you were a player, you came through Rotherham, and obviously being a hometown player. When you were developing Crewe's play, so obviously a couple of them would have been from the local area. What sort of messages were you passing on from your experiences?
I think it's always more important for young players to young homegrown, local lads to not have much pressure. So we had Harry Clifton at Grimsby last year who felt the pressure, lived in the town, from the town. We had lots of boys at Crewe, from Winsford, Holmes Chapel, Cake is from Holmes Chapel. Winsford, sorry, Tom Lowry's from Holmes Chapel. They're all these little villages in and around Crewe. And, there's an element where it can get overawed for them, without a shadow of a doubt. But ultimately, you've got to give them the confidence and the belief that they're good enough. And that can come in many ways, and it depends on the individual. You could have very much of a Jack the Lad kind of chat with Charlie Kirk, because that's what he was like. Whereas you wouldn't do that with Perry NG, who is quite serious and quite, really mature for his age. And he'd take on things on board quite differently, albeit he was from up the road in Liverpool. But you've got to relate to these players. It's really important that you relate to, and not just the young ones, the old ones. When I was at Crewe, I had a 35, 36 and 37-year-old that I used to call the Dad's Army, and they loved being called the Dad's Army because it was a sort of sign of respect, if you like. I've stopped short of calling Greenie Esther, because I'm not sure I can go that far.
I've been calling him that for weeks, don't worry. Yeah, generally.
But it's all about engagement with the players and making them feel comfortable. I think that's really important, and not giving them too much pressure. I think I didn't, when I would come through at Rotherham, I didn't feel pressure. Ronnie Moore was terrific with me, and John Breckin, the assistant, who I still speak to, they were really good with me. They'd go on, do your stuff. Don't worry about it. If I did something wrong, they'd tell me. And that's the way it should be. But they were trying to help. And that's a big part of my job. So, it's just, I think it's getting a connection with the player and making him understand that I'm there for him. I'll only shout at him if he's not running around. If he's trying to do the right thing, then I will back him. It's as simple as that. And then I will sit him down and say, look, could you have done this? Or did you see this? Or we're going to work on this outside, and whatever it might be. And devote time to him, as opposed to just saying I've got your back. Actually go and give him my time. and that's for all the players. Sometimes that's a lot, but then that's my job. Go and show them that I've got time for them and devote my time to them. I think that allows the players the freedom. You know, the first game that I took over at Grimsby was MK Dons away. We had MK Dons away, Oxford away, 2 real tough away games, first 2 games. And the lads went out and played with real freedom. Now, they hadn't done that in the previous games that I'd watched. But they did, because I went, it's okay. If you try and play, you're not going to get shouted at. And I can remember Anthony Glennon rolling the ball inside and it getting cut out. It's like, it's okay. Try not to do that, obviously. But I'll take the blame. It's the onus is on me. I want you to be expressive and play with enough freedom that you don't play with fear, because I think too many players play with fear. I'll just put it here because I don't want to make a mistake because the manager will shout at me. Well, nobody does the best work under fear. There might be respect and a smidgen of fear, but not too much, because it immobilizes you. It makes you stop running around. So that's what I try and do, whether that's homegrown, young, old, or anywhere in between, really.
That's really interesting to know that. One thing I just wanted to touch on, obviously when you left Crewe, you had a bit of period out of the game. I'd imagine you probably weren't sure on job offers, or you were going for jobs at the time. But obviously, I think it was just over a year and a little bit before you eventually took on the Grimsby job. What sort of lessons and stuff did you really learn from sort of like your period out of the game that maybe you probably didn't get a chance to probably beforehand?
Well, I went and visited lots of different high-performing environments. I went into Sale Sharks a couple of times. I went into GB Taekwondo. I went into GB Cycling. I went into West Ham probably 3 times. I had dinner with David Moyes a couple of times. I went into Brentford a few times. I went into Liverpool probably a dozen times. So I was taking a period just for myself. You know, I did turn down lots of jobs, and in the end, I was turning down too many. That's the truth, because people then think that there's a huge recency bias in football. You know, you have a look at who gets transferred after the next World Cup or Euros. It's the ones who's done well in that tournament. It's bonkers. You know, that whereas probably 6 weeks earlier, they're probably just a very good player in playing international football. So you've got to be really careful that you're not developing yourself and making myself better, but not actually, or diminishing my employment prospects. That's why, you know, like I say, Andrew and Jason were the right people, because they get life. That's the truth. They get how people develop. They get how people work, and they've been really good. So, you know, that's why I took the plunge with them. I asked them lots of questions, and they asked me lots of questions, and that's how I like it. So, as opposed to just, you know, being told, you did well at this club, can you replicate it here? Let's go. And it's like, there's a bit more to it than that. But yeah, that's what I was doing.
Yes, it's good to know. One thing you was on about there with the obviously with the Grimsby job. I remember the first interview you did, and you mentioned about clubs saw you as the plan.
Yeah.
For what you mentioned. What obviously you just touched on a little bit there, but what made Grimsby sort of feel right, so to speak?
Well, like I said, the owners, first of all, because they get that I am not the plan. I am part of the plan. I might be the driver of the bus, but if I ain't got anybody in the seats behind me, it's not going to go anywhere. And then it's getting the right people in the right seats on the bus, and with a route map of where we need to go. Whereas, in my experience, which admittedly is only 2 clubs deep, from what I saw during my time out of the game, most people think that the head coach or manager is the plan, has got the route mapped out, and as long as he brings an assistant with him, everything's going to be hunky-dory. And it's like, football doesn't work like that. It just doesn't. You know, you look at the really well-run clubs in the country, your Brentfords, your Brightons, your Ipswiches. They've got a whole process and, you know, a systemic approach and a plan underneath very good head coaches. You know, Thomas Frank lost 8 out of his first 10 games. Nobody remembers that. Whereas the club weren't panicking. Why? Because they'd done all their research on Thomas Frank and they knew he was going to come good for him. Gets him out of the Championship. Fantastic Premier League club. You know, because the plan was there and it wasn't Thomas Frank that was the issue, if you like. You know, and that's been proven. And when you come out the other side and when you see that, everyone goes, "Oh yeah, yeah." Whereas, you know, there's not a lot of clubs that take the time to do that. You know, when I did my pro license, my study was on the what football clubs, what elite environments look for when hiring a head coach or manager. And I went to rugby clubs. I went to Warwickshire County Cricket Club. And I interviewed quite a lot of chief execs and owners, and it was really interesting to see what they did and didn't do. You know, so I could educate myself because I'd only been at one club and I'd not gone through an interview process, so I wanted to find all this out. So you know that when you come across some good owners, it sort of smacks you in the face because you know what you're looking for, and that was the case with Grimsby, I have to say.
Good stuff. Jake, anything you want to add?
What sort of would be a big concern for you in an interview? What an owner would say?
You play in a certain way. You must play this way. You must play this player. Thank you. Bye-bye. You know, that I will take the can and the flag, and I get that. You know, the responsibility travels upwards, and I sit at the top of quite a lot of people underneath who's doing lots of good work and all these processes. But not if somebody above me tells me that I've got to play certain players or a certain way. That can't happen. Not for me anyway. That's a big red flag for me.
Yeah, you mentioned just about that staff. If you went back to Crewe, obviously in those circumstances, would you still do all those jobs that you did, or would you look to hire people?
No, I pestered the chairman for literally years for a head of recruitment, and they said no, and no, and no, until they eventually said yes. And not many people know this. They agreed to bring in a chief scout and a head of recruitment and did all the interviews. They signed their contract on Monday morning, and I got sacked Monday afternoon, which was really good. So just as they had agreed to it, that was me done. So I didn't see the benefit of any of the pestering that I'd done for the previous sort of 2.5 years. But I certainly didn't delegate enough, that's for sure. Were people competent enough? Well, the truth is I didn't find out. And that's a big regret. So I'm sure if you asked any of the staff at Grimsby, have they got autonomy in their role? Am I oppressive? I'd hope. And I think they will say I'm certainly not. And they've definitely got autonomy in their role because I allow it, because I've got good staff. Yes, there's all things that we can get better, of course. You know, it's the first time Sean's been an assistant manager, for example, and Ben's first team coach, you know, when they're learning. But at the same time, I'm giving them plenty of license to do their roles. And I think that's the right way to go about it, because I don't want to be a dictator. I didn't feel as though I was a dictator before, but at the same time, there were certain elements of it where I was, and that wasn't good because I was just on that bus on my own when I needed others. So that was the big, huge reflection, if you like, from my time at Crewe, because it's only when things go wrong that you sort of turn around and everyone's going, I'm all right here. And that's not good. That isn't good. And it's not because, listen, I didn't leave Crewe because of the staff. I left Crewe because of the fact that I didn't build the team out, the staff team, whilst we were going well, number one. But more importantly, we didn't have enough good players coming through when we sold half the team into the Championship to stay afloat after COVID. That's the biggest reason. And I think anyone who says otherwise is wrong. But I could have certainly helped that by building the team and competence behind me or around me during that time. Not a shadow of a doubt.
I like how you mentioned obviously the staff, because I remember obviously a few years ago under the previous regime. I mean, I looked at the squad picture recently, and you see all these staff members that are obviously around with the first team. It's night and day difference compared to what it was a few years ago, because you'd get probably you'd get way less than that now. So it certainly seemed like a big improvement on that part, which is pleasing to see. But that's just from a fan's aspect, anyway. One thing I did, mostly conscious of time, but we'll just talk about a little bit more. One thing we did want to bring up, one thing we did see was obviously your Gibraltar caps. I think it was certainly an interesting one in which we sort of looked into 7 appearances for the Gibraltar national team. What sort of experience was that like?
Listen, it was fantastic. I'd say it was daunting, hard work, as you can imagine. But there's not. We played against, Lewandowski at Poland, for example. We went and played Ireland in the Aviva. We played Germany in Germany 3 months after they won the World Cup, and they beat Brazil 7-1 in their own backyard 3 months earlier, and then a team of firemen, plumbers, hospital porters, and a couple of professionals turn up, trying to keep them at bay with all their superstars. It was, it was terrific. It was a great experience, and it's the pinnacle of anyone's career. However, I don't know. People might think it's Gibraltar, or it's this, or it's that. No, it wasn't. I was extremely proud, and it was a fantastic experience. And I would never begrudge anyone to play international football. I know last year, Curtis Thompson could have played international football, and I said, look, I will never ever stop you, irrespective of what situation we're in. And he didn't want to take up the opportunity in March to go and play, but that was his call, because it's a fantastic experience, I have to say. Even when you're right up against it, because you're not, you've only just become an international team, if you like, which Gibraltar had. They'd become the 54th member of UEFA. And it was tough. Every game was tough, even against your Liechtensteins of this world and your Estonias, never mind your powerhouses like Poland and Germany. So, but it was a fantastic experience, that's for sure.
How did it all come about? Because obviously you had this Football League experience with a load of different clubs. How did the call from Gibraltar came about, really? It seemed a bit...
My dad was born there, so my grandparents were in the Navy. They were stationed in Gib for well over 5 years, and my dad was born there. And as soon as they became members of UEFA, he sent an email to the GFA, and they got back in touch. The disappointing thing was, I think I was 34 at the time, and I was certainly on the wane, that's for sure. And playing for international football when I certainly wasn't the quickest player when I was 22, never mind 34. And trying to mark your Thomas Mullers of this world and your Lewandowskis is a challenge. So, listen, it was still a fantastic experience regardless. So, that's how it came about.
Fantastic. I mean, we are. I'm just, like I said, I'm just conscious of time. But David, it's been a pleasure, as I've mentioned. I mean, you just touched a little bit there on a little bit as on your playing days. You obviously said that you weren't probably wish it came probably a little bit sooner where you were. One question in which I think it was Jake that wrote this, actually, in which I found interesting. So how would probably you describe David Artell as a player in this day and age? Is it something that you probably would it maybe feel? Do you think it might feel different to maybe what it was all those years ago now when you were playing?
Yeah, I think with the introduction of the EPPP and how footballers are developed and society as a whole, it's certainly different. We weren't coached as well growing up. You had to coach yourself more. There was more emphasis and onus on players doing the right thing as opposed to being instructed to do the right thing. You know, we've had this discussion in our office saying, "Oh, there's no leaders." Well, that's because us as coaches don't make leaders. You know, how often do we say, "Right, go and warm up on your own, and make sure you come back here ready to play football"? Well, we don't, because the sports scientist does it for them. Well, we don't, you know, and we do the same when we coach them. Then when we ask them, "Did you not see that?" It's like, no, we expect you to see that because you tell us every day what to do. You know, so there wasn't that kind of culture in football when I grew up. How would I describe myself? Committed, hardworking, love football, would do anything to play football. You know, if I go home now, it's 2.5 hours in a car. I get out the other end and I can't walk properly. Just sit in the car for 2.5 hours because my Achilles is, well, I think there's more movement in a plank of wood than my Achilles, but that's because I got everything out of my body. I'm not sort of proud of that fact in that sense. I wish I had a normal functioning Achilles so I could carry on running and stuff. But I do know that I gave my all, and I can look myself in any mirror and say I tried my best every day. Every day I went to work, I tried my hardest, and I had to because I wasn't as blessed as others. And I think that I'm proud of that because I think that's what it takes. And the rewards, whether that be international football, promotions, you know, whether it's the start of your career, towards the end of your career, promotions as a manager, whatever, off the back of your playing career, you know, they come because you work your hardest and you graft and you get better and you have what we now call a growth mindset. Well, I just wanted to learn and get better every day. You know, I think I played the last 8 years of my career at left side centre half. Why? Because I spent more hours after training passing a ball with my left foot than anyone. You know, and it's because I realised that I can play it, and there's not many left side centre halves. And I did. I worked really hard to become as 2-footed as I could be for a centre half because I devoted the time to it. I think that's, you know, you hope that there's players like that now. There's definitely still players like that now. And you hope that you get a lot of them because they're the ones that you want. They're the diamonds. They're the ones that will get better without instruction, without us as staff being on top of them. That's why I think I had such a long career. I made it hard for managers to not pick me, as opposed to say, "Oh, he's good, he'll play." You know, because I'll be the first to admit I wasn't the best player, simply because I couldn't run as fast as others. If I could run fast, I'd have played a lot higher, because not many people devoted as much to the game as what I did and to myself as I did. And that's what I want from the players now. I don't think that's a secret or some sort of, I don't know, complex recipe for success. If you ask any sort of psychologist what's the key to becoming better and skill acquisition, they'd say repetition. Well, that's all I did. Repetition every day, as much as I could, in different settings, if you like, in different guises. But that's all it was. And that's why it takes time. That's why it takes time, because it doesn't come overnight. You know, if Gladwin said it takes 10,000 hours to learn the piano and what have you, I think it's probably more to learn to become a real good footballer. But it's probably not as much if you really devote and you're engaged to learning skills, new skills. You just got to do an extra 15 minutes here and an extra 10 minutes there, and they all add up. They certainly add up.
Who did you look at for inspirations in your playing career, David?
I think it was just elite people, and I don't mean that necessarily as just footballers. People who commanded respect, people who held themselves properly, people who were kind. You know, for example, I speak to Alan Irvine quite a lot. He's assistant manager at Scotland. You know, he's one of the most fantastic human beings you'll ever meet. He'll give you the time of day. you know, for as long as you want. He'll speak openly and honestly, and he will give you really good sound advice because he's probably seen it and done it himself. Because he's been a manager, assistant manager, all the way through the leagues. You know, he's been, you know, I say a scout. You know, he's done match analysis. He's done the whole works. But he's also humble, and he's a great bloke. So I look to people like him for inspiration, and there's been people like that all the way through my career. And some of them have been managers, some of them haven't been managers, some have been in football, not in football. And I try and pick up lots of different things. You know, I was on a webinar this afternoon with Richard Allen, who's he heads up FIFA's talent ID, for example. You know, he was at Tottenham, and he was a director of football at Loughborough Uni, and he helped England set up all their talent ID strategy and what have you. And you pick up lots of things. Lots and lots of different things, you know, and that's what you got to do to stay ahead in this game. Otherwise, somebody will come along and have your dinner.
Yeah, of course. Jake, anything else you want to add?
What are your ambitions in the future as a manager? Obviously, you say short term, obviously get promoted, but sort of in 10 years' time, where do you want to be managing? What sort of level?
Well, obviously the stock answer is to manage as high as possible. That's the stock answer. I'd like to manage abroad. I had the opportunity last summer to be assistant head coach in Belgium, in the top division in Belgium, and I turned that down. It didn't feel quite right because the owners, and so it was proven, I have to say. So I'd like to broaden my horizons there. But I think the short term is to get Grimsby back to where it belongs. That's the key. You know, I did that with Crewe. It was the highest we'd finished for 16 years at Crewe, and I know that this football club can do the same again, same as well. So that's the short to medium term, if you like, in the next 1, 2, 3 years, and then we'll go from there. But ultimately, I want to test myself, you know, and become as best a version I can be, because, you know, I think I've got a lot to offer.
Yeah, we can't really argue with that. David, as I said, it's been a joy to have you. You've been excellent. One more thing I just want to ask. We'll wrap it up at this. Obviously, being a Grimsby fan, and you know where you're at now, we know that obviously the season's still young. Probably at home on Saturday. What message in particular to Grimsby fans who may be listening? What would you say maybe it's like in terms of a message, probably for the season ahead and going forward beyond that, hopefully?
I think the first thing is I hope now people can see what we're trying to do. We believe it or not, we're still fairly new into this change, this whole pivot. You know, and it's not my pivot. It's right from the owners all the way through, and we've got to get better at it. You know, you look at a Brentford and a Brighton; they were, certainly in Brighton's case, they were playing in a stadium that wasn't even theirs, with a running track round, and it took them years. Now, I don't want this to take years. None of us want to take years, but that's how long these things do take. We have got better this summer, without a shadow of a doubt. The performances have improved. Are we still going to be inconsistent? Probably, but I hope we're not. Are we going to win more games than last season? Certainly. And I hope they stick with us. Because we'll see the fruits of our labours at some point in the future. Now, I'm hoping that's from this Saturday onwards. I'm also a realist and I'm also honest. You know, I could sit here and say, we're going to win every game. And, you know, it's just lies. But we know that we're on the right track. And why? Because I've done it before in very similar circumstances. You know, and I know it can happen, and it will happen, given time. So, I have said they've been fantastic with me personally. You know, I had a fan came to the training ground just today. Literally, he shouted at me last week when we were losing 2-0 against Barrow, and he was frustrated, and I was. I can guarantee he wasn't as frustrated as me. And he said some stuff, and he come to the training ground today to apologise. And I thought that was an unbelievable gesture, you know. And he said, look, I'm with you. I was just so annoyed. I said, I agree. I know exactly how you're feeling because I was feeling exactly the same. I said, and I understand exactly what you're saying and why you're saying it, but it doesn't help the players. I understand, I don't mind people only going at me. I prefer not to. But I also know that it's not going to be a smooth journey, but we're going to get to where we need to get to. I don't know when, but we will. I can't put a time scale on it because that'd be a lie. I hope it's as soon as possible, but I know we're going to get there because I know I've done it before and it'll happen again.
No, of course, and you certainly got my support with that. If there's something to take away from that, I think we'll wrap it up there. This has been brilliant. As I said, David, thank you so much for coming on, taking the time of what I assume is a bit of a busy schedule. Building up to a game in particular. You'll probably hopefully you'll hear me in the upper on Saturday where we've just taken 3 points up Bromley come 5 o'clock. It'd be nice for everyone.
I'll be looking out for you.
So, yeah, certainly. Just near it's near the top, near the Osmond is, and it's quite near the big advertising board. That's where you can find me. I've just given my season ticket away to people that are listening, but I'm not really that bothered. Jake, as always, thank you so much for joining tonight.
Yeah, a huge thank you for you, David, for joining us. It's been a real honour to have you on Fourth Day Fever. So best of luck going forward.
Not a problem. Thank you, Jake.
Yeah, we wish you all the best going forward with that, David. Make sure you go and stream this podcast wherever you get your streaming. Wherever you get podcasts from, Spotify, Apple, do we do it? I can't remember things. Make sure you go and follow us on YouTube as well. This will come out as a video and there as well. Make sure you keep up to date with all our socials as well. You can follow us on Twitter at Fourth Tier Fever. Make sure you go and give us a follow. Make sure you go give us a follow on our personal accounts as well as Luke and Kieran, who couldn't be here tonight. We'll be back on Sunday for recording of the games in which we take a deeper dive into all the action on Sunday, on Saturday's games even, but we'll do it on Sunday. Now, whether it'll come out Sunday or Monday yet, we'll have to see what happens. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you then. Until then, take care.